Her sister got the house, the car, and the savings account. She got a key to a diner that hadn't opened in 30 years. The door opened, and 30 years of silence pushed back like a living thing. And in the back, past the kitchen, past the walk-in, a steel door she'd never seen before. Claire Thedford pulled the Honda Civic into Harlan, North Carolina at 4:47 on a Tuesday afternoon in March, and the town looked exactly the way a place looks when it's been forgetting itself for decades. Population 1,100, though that number was generous and everyone knew it. Main Street had a hardware store, a post office open 3 days a week, and a laundromat with a hand-lettered sign in the window that read, "Exact change only." The rest was boarded storefronts and cracked sidewalks, and the kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like something left behind. The Civic had 214,000 miles on it. The taillight on the passenger side was cracked and held together with packing tape. The engine made a sound on hills that Claire had learned to ignore because ignoring it was cheaper than fixing it. She had $211 in her checking account. Not around 200, not roughly. $211, and she could tell you where every cent of it was going. Gas to get here had cost $38. The motel she'd passed on Route 19 wanted $59 a night, which meant she wasn't staying at the motel. A pack of crackers from the gas station outside Asheville had been $1.25, and she'd eaten half of them slowly over 60 miles, saving the rest in the glove box like a person who understood what $211 meant when there was no $212 coming behind it. Everything she owned was in the duffel bag on the back seat. A few changes of clothes, a toothbrush, a phone charger, a single brass key on a frayed red lanyard. That key was the whole reason she was here. Now let me take you back 3 weeks, because that's where this thing actually cracked open. A lawyer's office in Raleigh. Wood-paneled walls, leather chairs, the particular hush of a room where someone's life gets divided into line items. Opal Thedford had died at 81 in a hospital bed in Marion, and her will was 2 pages long and very specific. To Nora Thedford, the elder granddaughter, age 36, the house on Riddle Creek Road, appraised at $285,000. The 2019 Subaru Forester, paid off. The savings account containing $43,200. Everything tidy, everything expected, everything wrapped in a bow that smelled like stability. To Claire Thedford, the younger granddaughter, age 32, the property and contents of the former Thedford Diner, 14 Mill Street, Harlan, North Carolina. That was it. A building nobody wanted in a town nobody remembered. The lawyer slid the brass key across the desk on its red lanyard, and Claire picked it up and wrapped it around her left wrist without a word. Nora didn't look at her, sat there with her slim black leather portfolio tucked under her arm, her honey blonde hair blown out perfect, her camel coat buttoned to the collar like armor. Didn't look at Claire, didn't speak to Claire, and here's what I need you to understand. That silence wasn't new. That silence was 14 years old and counting. Their mother left when Claire was 4. Just gone one morning, car keys and a suitcase and a note nobody ever showed her. Nora stayed with their father in Raleigh, got the good school, the braces, the college fund, the stable address. Claire got sent to Grandma Opal, got the diner. Summers washing dishes before she was tall enough to see over the sink, sleeping in the booth by the front window with a quilt Opal kept folded under the register, learning to make buttermilk biscuits before she could reach the counter standing on her own feet. That diner was the only place that ever felt like a floor beneath her. Then Opal's health started cracking at the edges, and at 18, Claire got shipped to her father's house in Raleigh to live with him and Nora and the stepmother. She lasted 8 months. The stepmother had a way of looking at Claire like she was a stain on the carpet that wouldn't come out. Never said it loud enough for anyone else to hear, just made sure Claire understood she was taking up space that wasn't hers. Claire left with $34 and a garbage bag of clothes, and she did not go back. 14 years of warehouse jobs and shared apartments, and sleeping in that Civic when the math got too tight, and she did not go back. Until now. The diner stood at 14 Mill Street like a tooth nobody had pulled. Single story, flat roof, cinder block painted white a long time ago. The paint had gone gray and was peeling in sheets. The awning over the front door sagged on one side. The windows were dark and filmy with years. Claire turned the brass key in the front lock, and the door opened with a sound like the building was exhaling. Dust and old grease and something sweeter underneath. Maybe the ghost of biscuit flour worked into the walls over 40 years. The vinyl on the booth seats had cracked into little continents. A calendar on the wall behind the counter still showed October 1994. Her boots left prints on the floor as she moved through the room, and her hand found the Formica counter and ran along its length and came away gray. 30 years of silence sitting on every surface like sediment. In the kitchen, Opal's apron still hung from the hook by the walk-in. White cotton with tiny blue flowers, the ties knotted exactly the way Opal always knotted them, like she'd just stepped out and was coming back. Claire pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes until the pressure steadied her. Then she kept moving. A sound at the back door. Not a knock, a weight shifting. Through a gap in the warped boards, she saw him. A big German Shepherd mix, old, his muzzle gone white, ribs faintly visible under a dull black and tan coat, one ear torn and healed crooked. He lay against the back door and watched her with deep brown eyes that did not blink. He did not approach. He did not bark. He'd been here longer than anyone, and he knew it. Past the kitchen, a narrow corridor she didn't remember from childhood, and at the end of it, a steel door with a padlock. Heavy, industrial, the kind of door you put up when you want something to stay closed. Claire unclipped the brass key from the red lanyard on her belt loop, tried it in the padlock. It didn't fit. She tried again, slower, turning it both ways. Nothing. She stood there for a long moment, holding the key, staring at the door. The crowbar was in the utility closet, behind a mop bucket and a box of rags that smelled like 1993. She worked the hasp for 20 minutes, the screws protesting in the old wood frame, her hands aching, her knuckles going white around the cold iron. One screw, then another, then the hasp pulled free with a groan that echoed down the corridor. Claire pressed her shoulder against the steel door, and it opened 6 inches with a groan, and the smell that hit her was not rot but cedar and old paper, and something faintly like dried lavender. The flashlight beam finds a wall of shelves, floor to ceiling, packed with boxes. She steps inside. The beam cut through 30 years of stillness and landed on cardboard. Not scattered, not piled, organized. Bankers' boxes lined the shelves in neat rows, each one labeled in a cramped hand with black marker. 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. Filing cabinets stood along the left wall, olive green metal with alphabetical tabs visible through the slots. A wooden desk sat in the center of the room, small and square, the kind you'd find in a school principal's office circa 1975. On it, a leather-bound ledger thick as a family Bible. And everywhere, bundled envelopes, stacked tight, held together with rubber bands so old and brittle they'd cracked into fragments just sitting there, leaving little brown rings on the paper. This was not a junk closet. This was not where Opal Thedford kept old receipts and broken things she meant to fix. This was an archive. The walls were lined with cedar planks, not the shelving, the actual walls behind the shelves. Opal had insulated this room on purpose. No moisture, no mold, no rot. The cedar smell was so thick it sat in Claire's throat like something she could chew. Cedar and old paper, and underneath it, just barely, that ghost of dried lavender she'd caught when the door first opened. The brass key on its frayed red lanyard swung lightly against her wrist as she reached for the first box. She pulled down the one labeled 1970s. The lid came off clean. Inside, spiral notebooks, the cheap kind with the wire binding, college-ruled, covers gone soft. Claire opened the first one. Opal's handwriting filled every line, cramped and precise, slanting slightly right. Each entry was the same format: a name, a date, a dollar amount, and a single line, never more, describing what the money was for. February 1974. Burris, Dale, $340. Furnace repair, family of 5, wife recovering. Claire's gray-green eyes tracked down the page. June 1975. Mayhew, Colleen, $120. Groceries 3 weeks, husband out of work. November 1975. Stinson, R. $85. Winter coat and boots, 2 children. A dozen entries, then 2 dozen. She turned pages, and the wire binding bit into her thumb and she didn't notice. The notebook was full, front to back, every line accounted for. She put it down and counted the remaining notebooks in the box. 14 more. She set the box on the floor and went to the desk. The ledger was heavier than it looked. She opened it and the spine cracked with a sound like a knuckle popping. Inside, a master index. Names in alphabetical order, written in the same cramped hand, each one followed by dollar amounts and page references cross-linked to the spiral notebooks. Dates running down the left margin. The first entry, March 1962. The last entry, September 1994. 1 month before the diner closed for good. Claire ran her finger down the columns. Her lips moved as she counted. She got to the bottom of the first page, flipped to the second, kept counting, then the third, then the fourth. 237 names. I need you to stop here and understand what you're looking at, because the numbers are about to start sounding impossible, and I promise you they're not. Opal Thedford ran a diner that seated 32 people. She cooked breakfast and lunch 6 days a week. She never owned a new car. She never took a vacation anyone in Harlan could remember. She never made more than she needed, and that's the part that matters, because she decided what needed meant, and it didn't mean what most people think it means. Over 32 years, Opal quietly gave away every spare dollar she earned to every person in Harlan County who needed help and couldn't bring themselves to ask for it. 237 names, not a charity, not a foundation, not a single tax deduction. Just a woman with a pencil and a spiral notebook and a conviction that keeping score was something you owed the people you helped, not so they'd know, but so the help would never be forgotten. Not one of those 237 people knew where the money came from. Claire set the ledger down. Her hands were shaking and she pressed them flat against the desk until the wood grain bit into her palms. Then she saw it. A cedar plank on the back wall, behind the lowest shelf, sitting slightly proud of the others. She knelt. The flashlight caught the gap, maybe a 1/4 inch, where the plank didn't sit flush. She worked her fingernails into the seam and pulled. The plank slid out smooth, like it had been pulled 100 times before. Behind it, a row of small envelopes stood upright in a narrow channel cut into the wall studs. Each envelope was labeled with a year. The first was the year Claire was born. They continued in sequence, every single year, through age 18. And then 3 more, for the years after she left Harlan. 18 envelopes total. Claire pulled them out one at a time, holding each one like it might dissolve. She opened the one from her 8th birthday, the summer she learned to make Opal's biscuits, standing on a milk crate to reach the counter. The card was simple, a grocery store card with flowers on the front. Inside, Opal's handwriting. "You have good hands, Claire. Bread knows." She opened the 14th. The summer Opal taught her to balance the register, patient as stone while Claire miscounted change for the 3rd time. "This girl will outwork everyone who ever doubted her. I've seen it." The cards from after she left Harlan each had a $50 bill tucked inside. Crisp, unspent, waiting. Claire's fingers found the last one, the 18th card, the year she turned 18 and was sent away from Harlan with a duffel bag and $34 and a photograph she kept in the inside pocket so it wouldn't bend. She opened the envelope. The card was plain white, no flowers, no store-bought anything, just Opal's handwriting, smaller now, pressed hard enough that the pen had dented the paper from the other side. "I tried to keep you. They wouldn't let me. This diner is yours. It has always been yours. I just need a little more time to make sure." 7 words into that sentence and Claire's throat closed. She pulled the card against her chest with both hands and slid down the wall to the floor, the cedar plank still leaning where she'd left it, the flashlight rolling in a slow half-circle across the concrete. Dutch pushed through the open back door and crossed the room without hesitation, his torn left ear catching the edge of the light, and lay down beside her without being called. Morning light through the gap in the boards finds Claire asleep on the diner floor, with Dutch curled against her back, and the birthday cards fanned across the linoleum beside her. 18 of them, one for every year. The last one still pressed against her chest where she'd held it when sleep finally pulled her under sometime around 3 in the morning. Her dark auburn hair has come loose from the ponytail, strands stuck to her cheek, and the brass key on the frayed red lanyard is tangled around her left wrist where she'd been gripping it in her sleep. Dutch's torn left ear twitches, his deep brown eyes open first. He watches the light move across the floor like he's been measuring mornings in this building longer than anyone alive. Claire sits up. Her back pops twice. The olive green canvas jacket she'd balled under her head is creased and damp from her own breath, and she pulls it on slowly, blinking at the cards spread around her like some kind of strange constellation. She picks up the one dated the year she turned 18, the year she left Harlan with a garbage bag of clothes and $34 in a checking account her stepfather couldn't touch because he didn't know it existed. Opal's handwriting on the envelope. Opal, who she'd been told died years ago. Opal, who apparently never stopped writing. She sets the card down carefully and does what she always does first thing, the math. $211 in her checking account, minus the gas to get here, $23 and change. That leaves $188. She finds a napkin on the counter and a pen in her jacket pocket and writes the numbers down in small, tight script. A pack of crackers at the hardware store, $1.25. A jug of water, $1.10. The cheapest meal at the gas station counter 2 miles up the road, $4.50. One coffee. She allows herself one coffee at Millard's, the only place in Harlan still open that has a working pot, $2. She writes the daily total. She divides. At this rate, if she eats once a day and drinks water and doesn't drive anywhere, she has roughly 3 weeks before she hits absolute zero. 3 weeks to figure out what to do with a condemned diner full of birthday cards and a sealed room full of notebooks written by a woman everybody told her was dead. She folds the napkin and puts it in her back pocket. Around 9:30, a rusted Ford F-250 pulls up outside. The engine has that particular rattle of a truck that's been running on stubbornness for 200,000 miles. The door opens slowly. Out steps a stocky, broad-shouldered man with silver gray hair cropped close on the sides, pale blue eyes under thick gray brows, and a small dark mole on the right side of his chin. Dale Burris. He moves with that slightly bow-legged gait of a man whose knees remember every winter, and in his left hand he carries a dented green Stanley thermos by the handle. He does not knock. He walks in through the back door like he's done it 1,000 times, sets a brown paper bag on the counter, and looks at Claire with an expression that holds no curiosity and no pity, just recognition. "Your grandmother made the best biscuits in 4 counties. I figured you might be hungry." That's it. That's the whole introduction. Inside the bag, a ham sandwich on white bread, an apple, a bottle of water. He glances at the open steel door behind the counter, the one Claire pried open the night before, and he does not ask a single question about what's inside. He walks back to his truck, returns with a socket set and a flashlight with fresh batteries, sets them on the counter next to the sandwich, and leaves. The F-250 rattles back down Mill Street. Dutch watches it go, then settles his chin on his paws. Claire eats the sandwich standing up. Then she goes back into the archive. The 1980s box is where the scope of it starts to come into focus. And I need you to understand something. This isn't a woman who tucked a few dollars into a few envelopes. This is something else entirely. Opal Thedford co-signed loans for families who couldn't get a bank to look at them. She paid electric bills anonymously by walking into the power company office in Burnsville and handing them cash with an account number written on a slip of paper. She bought school supplies, notebooks, pencils, calculators, and left them on porches in paper bags with no note. She paid for 3 surgeries. Claire finds the receipts paperclipped to the notebook pages, each one logged in that same careful handwriting. Dale Burris's wife, gallbladder surgery, $3,200. The Mayhew boy, broken arm, $1,800. An elderly man named Virgil Combs, cataract operation, $4,100. Every dollar accounted for, every name written down, every receipt saved. Then, Claire opens the filing cabinet, the drawer labeled H. Inside, a folder marked Hull. She pulls it out. Property tax records for the Hull family farm. 6 consecutive years in the 1980s, paid anonymously by Opal Thedford when the farm was on the edge of foreclosure. A note in Opal's handwriting clipped to the first receipt. Richard Hull. Good man, bad luck. Family has a boy, 8 or 9. Taxes, $620 per year, paid through 88. Have you ever held proof that kindness can be invisible for 40 years and still be holding something up? Because that folder is about to become the most important piece of paper in this entire story. Richard Hull's boy grew up. His name is Garrett Hull. He is 44 years old, tall and lean, dark brown hair combed back and graying at the temples, hazel brown eyes sharp beneath thin, angular brows. He wears a charcoal wool overcoat over a white dress shirt open at the collar. His signature move is clicking a black ballpoint pen with his right thumb. He is a developer based in Asheville. He has been buying parcels along Mill Street for a mixed-use development project. Restaurants, retail, apartments. The Thedford Diner sits on the last parcel he needs. He has been waiting for Opal to die. He just didn't know she'd leave it to anyone. A black Audi pulls up outside at 3:45. Garrett steps out. His posture is military straight. He is polite. He is warm. He tells Claire he's sorry for her loss. He knew Opal. Everyone did. He explains the project. Good for Harlan. Good for everyone. Then he says the number. $250,000. Cash. 30-day close. She can walk away today with a check. The diner is not for sale. 5 words. No anger, no explanation. Just a fact as heavy as the concrete under her boots. Garrett Hull slides a business card across the Formica counter. Hull Development Group, Asheville, and says the number one more time. $250,000. Cash. 30-day close. Claire looks at the card and does not pick it up. He clicks his pen and waits. Garrett's business card sits on the Formica counter untouched. Claire stands behind the counter looking at it the way you look at a crack in a dam, knowing exactly how much pressure is behind it. He's gone. His polished black Oxfords carried him out the door 15 minutes ago, that black ballpoint pen clicking in his right hand the whole way to his car. $250,000. The number hangs in the diner like cigarette smoke that won't clear, and Claire hasn't touched the card. She stands there with her hands in the pockets of that faded olive-green jacket, the brass key on its frayed red lanyard catching the gray light from the gap between the boards, and she looks at that little rectangle of cardstock like it's a loaded weapon someone left on her kitchen table. Here's where the math gets ugly. She started this with $188. Gas to get here cost $12. The crackers and peanut butter and the 1 can of coffee she allowed herself, $11. Yesterday, another can of soup and a jug of water from the gas station in Brevard, $12 more. She's at $165. That's it. That's the whole fortune. And the diner has no electricity. The account was closed in 1995, 28 years ago, and the power company wants a $175 reconnection fee plus a $200 deposit before they'll even think about sending someone out. $375 to turn the lights on. She has $165, so she works by flashlight. She works by the thin, gray light that leaks through the gaps where boards have warped away from window frames. She works like Opal worked, with what she has and nothing more. And what she finds in that gray light changes everything. The 1990s box, the last decade of the fund. Claire pulls the lid off and the notebooks inside are different. The handwriting is the same careful cursive, but it's faster now, pressed harder into the paper. Opal was accelerating. Where the 1970s showed 3 or 4 families helped per year, and the 1980s showed 8 or 10, the 1990s show 15. 20. 23 families in 1992 alone. Larger amounts too. Not just $40 for groceries or $60 for a water bill, but $400 for a transmission repair, $600 toward a security deposit, $1,100 for dental surgery for a woman named Rena Pace. Opal was pouring money out like water through a sieve, but the diner's income was going the other direction. A note in Opal's hand, September 1989. Highway bypass opened, down to 11 customers on Tuesday, 7 on Wednesday. The bypass took the through traffic, and the through traffic was the bloodstream. By 1991, the daily register totals in the logbook are $40, $50 on a good day. By 1993, they're under 30. And Opal's personal savings, she kept a running tally on the inside back cover of each notebook, dropped from $14,000 to $9,000 to $4,000 to $1,600. She was spending more than she earned. She was draining herself dry to keep the fund alive. By September 1994, the diner's operating account had $12.40 in it. Opal Thedford closed the doors, not because she was tired, not because she was old, because she had given every single cent away, and there was nothing left to give. That's the scale. Not a generous woman who helped when she could, an architect of survival who dismantled her own life board by board to keep other people standing. Claire's phone buzzes on the counter next to the business card. Nora. The conversation lasts 90 seconds. Claire puts it on speaker because her hands are covered in dust, and Nora's voice fills the dead diner like perfume in a hospital room. Expensive and completely wrong for the space. $250,000, Claire. You're sleeping on the floor of a condemned building. This is not a life. This is a tantrum. That word, tantrum. Like Claire as a child throwing herself on the floor of a grocery store. Like inheriting your grandmother's diner and choosing to stand in it is something a grown woman needs to be scolded out of. Those are Grandma's things in there, Claire says. Grandma is dead, and she left me what mattered and she left you what was left over. That should tell you something. Let that sit for a second. Nora Thedford, honey blonde hair blown out to her collarbone, slim black leather portfolio probably tucked under her arm right now even though she's on the phone because she doesn't know who she is without it. Just told her younger sister that she got the scraps, the leftovers. That Opal looked at Claire's life and decided she was worth a condemned building and a dog. And Nora said it like she was being helpful. Claire hangs up. She does not respond. She sets the phone face down on the counter next to Garrett's card and goes back to the filing cabinets. Dale's truck pulls up around 6. She hears the engine before she sees the headlights, that heavy diesel idle, the creak of a door, boots on gravel. He comes through the front carrying a space heater under one arm and an orange extension cord looped over the other. His dented green Stanley thermos hangs from 2 fingers. He sets the heater inside the door, runs the cord out to his truck's inverter, and plugs it in. The coils glow orange. Heat, actual heat, pushing back against the November cold for the first time since Claire arrived. "I'll be back in the morning," Dale says. "The dog likes ham." He leaves. No explanation. No questions about the business card on the counter, or the phone call, or the dust on her hands. Just heat, delivered like it was owed. Night falls. The space heater ticks and glows, and Dutch settles at Claire's feet with a long exhale, his torn left ear twitching once before he stills. She reads, and the patterns emerge like constellations. You don't see them until you look long enough. Opal helped a mother named Ginny Suttles in 1965. Groceries, rent, a winter coat. Then, in 1988, Ginny's daughter, Laurel Suttles Pratt, a car repair so she could keep her job at the cannery. A father with a broken truck in 1971, name of Boyd Ellers. His son, Travis Ellers, welding certification paid in full, 1992. Opal wasn't scattering charity like seeds on pavement. She was building something. A web, a structure, generational survival, stitched together one quiet act at a time across decades, across families, across an entire town that never knew a single woman in a diner kitchen was the reason half of them were still standing. Claire reaches the last filing cabinet. She has opened every drawer except the bottom one in the final column. The tab reads T. She pulls it open. Inside is a manila folder 3 inches thick. On the tab, in Opal's handwriting, "For Claire, when she comes home." Claire pulls the folder out, and her hands are shaking so badly the papers rattle against each other like leaves. She sank to the floor right there in the storage room, the manila folder across her knees, Dutch pressed warm against her leg. The space heater ticked in the silence like a metronome, counting down to something she wasn't ready for. The first page was a legal document, official letterhead, Harlan County Family Court, Commonwealth of Kentucky, filed March 14, 2006. Claire read it once and the words didn't connect. She read it again. Petitioner, Opal Grace Thedford, requesting legal custody of her granddaughter, Claire Ann Thedford, age 18. Claire's hands went still on the paper. 2006. That was the year her father showed up out of nowhere with a station wagon and a court order and a smile that never reached his eyes, and drove her to Raleigh, and dropped her in a bedroom that smelled like fresh paint and indifference. The year everyone told her she was lucky. The year she stopped arguing with anyone about anything because arguing never changed the car's direction. The petition was denied. The reason, spelled out in dry legal language that might as well have been a knife. Opal's annual income fell below the threshold for legal guardianship. She had no permanent residence other than a commercial property, the diner. The court determined it was not a suitable living environment for a minor. A diner where Claire had slept in the back booth every Friday night for 6 years. A diner where she'd learned to read by sounding out the specials board. A diner that smelled like coffee and biscuit dough, and the only version of safe she'd ever known. Not suitable. She turned to the second document, a letter from Opal's attorney, a man named Parrish whose office was apparently above the hardware store on Main, stating that Claire's father, Richard Thedford, had contested the custody petition. Attached was Richard's affidavit. Claire skimmed it. Stable income, 3-bedroom house, good school district. Every word calibrated to sound like a man who gave a damn. Richard Thedford, ladies and gentlemen, Father of the Year. The man who forgot Claire's birthday 3 years running in Raleigh. The man who left a $20 bill on the kitchen counter every Monday and called it parenting. The man who told her at 19 that she was old enough to figure it out, handed her a garbage bag, and closed the door. But in 2006, he had paperwork, and paperwork beats love in family court every single time. In the margin of the attorney's letter, in Opal's handwriting, that same careful cursive from the notebooks, a single sentence. He doesn't want her. He wants to prove he can take her. There is a difference. Claire pressed her thumb against those words until the ink smudged against her skin. The third document wasn't a document at all. It was a savings bond. United States Series EE, $500 face value, purchased January 19, 1990. Claire's hands were shaking now, actually shaking, not the kind you can control, and she lifted it out and found another one underneath. Then another, then another. 16 savings bonds, 1 per year, 1990 through 2005, each purchased for $500. The maturity schedule was staggered across decades, the way someone who understood patience and compound interest would do it. Claire did the math on the back of the custody petition because it was the only paper she could reach. 500 times 16 is $8,000 in face value, but Series EE bonds double at maturity, and some of these were 34 years old, $52,341. Have you ever held something in your hands that proved someone loved you before you even knew you needed it? Because Claire was holding 16 of them. 1 for every year from the time she turned 6 until the year they took her away. Opal bought a bond for Claire every January like clockwork, while running a diner that barely broke even, while quietly feeding half the county from a fund nobody knew about. $500 a year she did not have, set aside for a girl she believed would come home. The last item in the folder was a letter, handwritten. The cursive was shakier than the notebooks, a hand that had grown older or tired or both. It was addressed to Claire. No date, but the paper had yellowed the way paper does when it's been waiting a long time. Claire read it slowly. Opal explained everything. The fund started in 1962, the winter Walter died and left her with a diner, a grease trap, and nothing else. She was 31 years old and the loneliest woman in Harlan County, and she decided right then that she would never let anyone in that county feel as alone as she did that February. So she started giving away what she could spare. $1 here, a bag of flour there, then more, then systematically, then for 32 years straight. She bought the bonds for Claire because she knew. She wrote it plainly, the way she wrote everything. You were always coming back. I just had to make sure there was something here worth coming back to. Claire pressed her forehead against the letter. Her throat closed. Her eyes burned so hard she couldn't see the words anymore, and the paper rattled against her knees because her hands would not stop shaking. She made a sound that was not a word, just air forced through a chest that had forgotten how to breathe normally. Dutch pushed his white muzzle against her arm and held it there, steady as a hand. She sat on that cold floor for a long time. Now here's where I need you to stay with me, because what happened next is the part that almost broke the whole thing. 2:47 a.m. The storage room was dark behind her. Claire sat at the Formica counter under the single work light with Garrett Hull's business card in her left hand and her phone in her right. His number was on the screen. Her thumb rested on the call button. The math. $91 in checking, bonds worth $52,000, but she couldn't cash them without a bank account and sorted identification. That's weeks of paperwork minimum. Electricity reconnection, $375. Food for the week, $30. Gas to the county seat for bond paperwork, $18. She was $332 short of surviving the month. Garrett Hull's offer, $250,000. She could eat tomorrow. She could sleep in a warm room. She could pay off the car that was slowly dying in the parking lot. She could stop doing math at 2 in the morning like a woman counting the steps to a cliff edge. The wind pushed against the boards. Dutch lifted his head from the floor and watched her, his deep brown eyes steady, his torn left ear cocked slightly forward. She did not press the button. Not yet. Dutch stands. That's what changes everything. Not Claire's thumb on the call button, not the math eating through her last $91, not the wind rattling the boards like something trying to get in. The dog stands. His hips creak. You can hear the joints protest from across the room, and he doesn't walk toward Claire. He walks away from her. Past the counter, past the stools, past the second booth and the third, all the way to the back of the diner. The last booth. The one by the window where the morning light used to come in gold and warm, where a little girl once slept curled on the vinyl bench with her jacket balled under her head. Dutch paws at the baseboard. Not scratching, not anxious, deliberate. One paw, then the other, his torn left ear cocked forward, his deep brown eyes locked on the wall like he's been waiting to show someone this for years. Claire sets the phone down. She sets Garrett Hull's card beside it. She crosses the diner in bare feet on cold tile and kneels beside the dog. The baseboard is original. Painted over so many times the edges are soft, the grain buried under layers of cream, and then white, and then cream again. She presses her thumb along the seam where the board meets the wall and feels it give. Not rot, a hinge. Hidden under decades of paint, a brass piano hinge no wider than a fingernail, and the board swings inward on it like a tiny door. Inside the wall, an envelope. Legal-sized, sealed with packing tape gone amber and brittle. Opal's handwriting on the front, in the same blue ballpoint as the ledger, as the birthday cards, as every hidden thing in this building. For Claire when she finds it. Her hands are shaking. She sits on the floor of the last booth with Dutch settling beside her, his muzzle on her knee, and she cracks the tape with her thumbnail. Inside, a will. Not the will. Not the one the probate court filed, not the one that split everything between Claire and Nora, with the diner going to Claire and the house and savings going to her older sister. This will is dated 1993, 9 years earlier, and it leaves everything to Claire. The diner, the house, the savings, all of it. Clipped to the front page, a note in Opal's hand. Small letters, pressed hard enough to dent the paper. Filed the other version in '02 because Nora's lawyer said she'd contest and tie it up for years. At least this way you get the diner clean. The diner is what matters. Everything I am is in these walls. Let that land. Opal knew. She knew what was hidden in the baseboards, behind the register panel, under the kitchen sink, inside the walls of every room. She knew the diner was a vault. She knew the ledger was in there, the bonds were in there, the birthday cards and the court documents, and the 237 names were in there. And she gave up the house and the savings, handed them to Nora on a silver platter, so the diner would pass to Claire without a fight, without lawyers, without Nora's manicured fingers anywhere near these walls. The diner was never the lesser inheritance. It was the only one that mattered. Claire sits on that cold floor with the will against her knees, and her forehead pressed to the paper, and she does not make a sound. Dutch breathes slow and steady against her leg. The brass key on the frayed red lanyard catches the light from the street lamp outside. Morning comes the way it does in towns like Harlan, slow, gray, without announcement. Claire walks to Millard's for coffee. $2, her one allowed expense. She has $89 left. Dale Burris is at the counter in his navy quilted vest and faded red and gray flannel, the dented green Stanley thermos beside him like it grew there. His thick gray eyebrows lift when she sits down. He doesn't ask. He waits. That's the thing about Dale. The man has never once in his life rushed another human being into talking. Claire tells him what she found. Not the amounts, not the bonds, the scope. 237 names, 50 years, a fund nobody knew existed, run out of a diner that seated 32, by a woman who died owing nothing. Dale sets down his coffee. His pale blue eyes go red at the rims. He looks at the counter for a long time. Then he says, quiet, like he's talking to someone who isn't there anymore. She paid for my wife's surgery in '83, $1,200. We never knew where it came from. Ruth went to her grave thinking it was the church. He pauses. His big weathered hands wrap around the thermos. Opal died owing nothing to anyone and being owed by everyone. That was the richest a woman could be. He doesn't say another word about it. He picks up his thermos and walks out, and the bell above the door rings once behind him. By 10 o'clock, Garrett Hull is back. And this time he brought a lawyer. The lawyer is a woman in a charcoal suit who smells like printer toner and speaks in paragraphs. She lays a purchase agreement on the counter, crisp, tabbed, flagged with yellow sticky arrows pointing to signature lines. $250,000. And a clause, buried on page 9 in type so small you'd need Dale's reading glasses to catch it, that transfers all contents of the building to Hull Development Group. All contents. Every notebook, every bond, every name in the ledger. 237 families reduced to a line item in a demolition inventory. Garrett clicks his black ballpoint pen. He explains calmly that the development will bring jobs to Harlan. 38 construction positions, a gas station, a pharmacy. He is not wrong. That's the hell of it. He is not wrong. Claire looks at the purchase agreement. She looks at the yellow arrows. She looks at Garrett Hull standing there in his charcoal overcoat, military straight, hands clasped behind his back, and she says 5 words. I'm not signing. The lawyer opens her mouth. Claire says, those are my terms. The room goes still. Garrett's pen stops clicking. And Claire does something I've been waiting to tell you about. She reaches behind the counter. She pulls out the folder marked Hull. She sets it on the formica in front of Garrett, and she does not say a single word. She just lets him read. He sees the property tax receipts, 6 years of them paid quarterly in amounts of $155 by Opal Thedford. He sees the note clipped to the inside cover in Opal's handwriting, "Good man, bad luck," about his father. He sees that his family's farm survived because a woman who ran a 32-seat diner in a town with no stoplight paid $620 a year out of a fund nobody knew existed so that a good man with bad luck wouldn't lose the only ground he had. Garrett's hand goes to his mouth. His pen stops. His hazel brown eyes lock on the receipts and do not move. He does not speak. He picks up the purchase agreement, folds it in half, and puts it in his coat pocket. He walks outside. He sits on the diner's front steps with his elbows on his knees and the folder open across his lap, the one marked Hull, and he is looking at the property tax receipts his father never knew about, paid for 6 years by a woman who ran a diner that seated 32. He closes the folder and sets it beside him. He does not go back inside. He sits there until the light changes. The light changed. That's what I said. And I mean that literally. The sun moved behind the ridge, and the shadow of the hardware store across the street slid over Garrett Hull like a curtain being drawn, and he just sat there in it. The folder marked Hull still beside him on the step, his polished black Oxfords planted on cracked concrete, that black ballpoint pen in his right hand, and for the first time since he walked into Ridley Falls, it was not clicking. Let me tell you what was in that folder, because Claire didn't explain it to him and she never will, so somebody has to. 6 property tax receipts, each one paid to the Garrett County Assessor's Office, each one stamped with a date: 1987, 1988, 1989, 1990, 1991, 1992. Each one covering a 40-acre parcel on Route 9 belonging to Thomas and June Hull. $620 a year, paid out of the fund, paid by a woman who ran a diner that seated 32 people on a good night and cleared maybe $400 a week in profit, and she took $620 of those dollars every single year and sent it to the county so a family she barely knew could keep their land. And clipped to the last receipt in Opal's handwriting, small, slanted, the ink faded to the color of weak tea, a note that said, "Good man, bad luck. Don't let the county take it. Thomas Hull." Garrett's father, the man whose farm Garrett grew up on, the man whose land Garrett sold in 2014 to fund his first development project, the man Garrett buried in 2016 without ever knowing that his family kept that farm because a woman in a 32-seat diner decided they should. So yeah, Garrett Hull sat on those steps and he did not move. And here's the thing about a man like Garrett: tall, military straight, charcoal overcoat, the pale birthmark behind his left ear catching the last of the light when he turned his head to look at nothing. A man like that has spent his whole adult life building a version of himself that doesn't need anybody. He's got the lawyers, he's got the paperwork, he's got the polished Oxfords and the measured stride that never hurries. He walked into that diner 3 weeks ago with a purchase agreement and a number that would have changed Claire's life, and he set it on the counter like he was doing her a favor. Like she should be grateful. Like she was some stray he was offering to bring in from the cold. And now he's sitting on the steps of the building he tried to buy, holding proof that his own family was the stray. That Opal Thedford brought them in. That the only reason Garrett Hull had a childhood worth remembering is because a woman he never met looked at a tax bill with his father's name on it and said, "Not on my watch." The pen is not clicking. Claire stood inside the diner, behind the counter, the brass key on its frayed red lanyard wrapped around her left wrist. Dutch was lying by the back door, his torn left ear twitching at a sound only he could hear. She did not go outside. She did not check on Garrett. She poured herself a cup of coffee from the pot Dale had made that morning. Dale Burris, who had come and gone already, leaving his dented green Stanley thermos on the counter like a man who planned to come back. And she drank it standing up, looking at the logbook open on the counter. Page after page of names, 237 of them, 50 years of keeping the lights on for people who never knew who was paying the bill. After a while, 10 minutes, maybe 15, the front door opened. Garrett stepped back inside. His overcoat was buttoned wrong. The folder was under his arm. He walked to the counter and he stood there and he looked at Claire, and she looked back at him with those gray-green eyes, the loose strands of dark auburn hair framing her face, the faint birthmark on the left side of her neck just below her ear, and neither of them said anything for a long time. Then Garrett reached into his coat pocket. He took out the purchase agreement. He unfolded it. He tore it in half, and then in half again, and he set the pieces on the counter next to the logbook. That's it. That's all he did. And then he said, And this is the only thing he said. "I didn't know." 3 words. Claire gave him one back. "Now you do." He left. His car started in the gravel lot. The sound of it faded down Route 12, and then it was quiet again, just the creak of the building settling and Dutch breathing by the back door and the coffee going cold in Claire's hand. If you've made it this far, stay with me, because this is the part I've been waiting to tell you. 3 months later, a load of lumber showed up at the diner. No invoice, no return address, just a delivery driver with a manifest that said, "Thedford, Opal, care of Claire," and a pallet of white oak planks and cedar trim stacked in the parking lot. Claire never found out who sent it. I have my suspicions. You probably do too. Dale Burris came back with his thermos and his socket set, and he didn't ask questions. He just started on the porch railing. A woman named Bess Garland drove up from Elkins with a casserole dish and a card that said, "Welcome home, Opal's girl," and she left before Claire could thank her. An elderly man named Porter, one of the 237, showed up with a truckload of firewood and stacked it against the west wall without a word. The diner reopened on a Tuesday in March. 32 seats, same counter, same kitchen. The logbook sat on a shelf behind the register, closed now, its work finished. But next to it, and this is the part that matters, Claire had started a new one. A composition notebook, black and white marble cover, and on the first page she had written a single line in handwriting that looked nothing like Opal's, but carried the same weight. Who needs help? How much? When? The light above the door was on, not because anyone asked her to turn it on, because she decided to. And on a Thursday night in April, a car pulled into the lot. Tan sedan, cracked taillight, a woman behind the wheel pressing the heel of her hand against her eyes until the pressure steadied her. She sat there for a long time. Dutch got up slowly, his hips stiff in the cold, and walked to the door and stood there looking out through the glass. Claire opened it. "You eat yet?" The woman shook her head. "Come inside." The light is still on. The door is open.